Alright, it's the e-bike guy here. I had a video up for this before, but it appears that it's been deleted, so I'll remake it. I've now got a little cheap little microphone here, so I'll do audio with it as well. Okay, a little bit of history on e-bikes here. Back in about 2006, I was getting into e-bikes. So I contacted the Department of Motor Vehicles, Ministry of Transport, etc. to find out what exactly the law was. And basically they told me in short that it would be a bicycle, not a motor vehicle. 2008 I started importing and selling them. And then suddenly around 2010 all of a sudden I start hearing some feedback that they're being told that they need to be registered. So I contact the Ministry of Transport again. I'm told the same thing, that no, they don't need to be registered. But now all of a sudden they started saying something about if it looks like a bike, it's a bike, but if it doesn't look like a bike, it's not a bike. It needs to be registered. So I asked them what legislation was passed that says this. Couldn't get an answer. I started asking for what are the specifications of what looks like a bike. Couldn't get an answer. So this phone tag and email tag kept going back and forth and still no answers. So I decide that enough is enough. I'm going to get some final answers. So I hear the police are giving out warnings that they need to be registered. I find out where. I hop on one, drive down, and I argue with them. I argue with them until I piss them off to the point they give me a ticket. Great, I got what I wanted, a ticket. This means I have grounds to fight. I take the existence of the ticket, shove it in the Department of Motor Vehicles' face, Ministry of Transport, Service New Brunswick. I say, see? You have to give me the specifications, because the cops are issuing tickets. What qualifies as a bicycle? What qualifies as an e-bike? What are the technical specifications that diverges one from the other? Still wouldn't give me any specifications. So, into court I go. Plead not guilty. This is the first time the prosecution, or the Crown, has ever heard of an e-bike. They still don't contact me with further information or clarification. So I send them a little information saying I want to know exactly what it is I'm being charged with. I want the details of the case. Either dismiss it or give me the information. They ignored me. Well, that was a mistake. Court date comes up. Tell the judge, sorry, they haven't complied with my request for information. I need that information to properly prepare defense. So, the case gets adjourned. A few weeks later, I get a call from the police saying, hi, can we come take a look at your bike? Needless to say, the judge probably gave a little bit of feedback to the Crown Attorney about ignoring the request for information. And once the Crown Attorney looked into it, they found out they didn't have a case. Gee, they could have saved a lot of time, energy, and money if they had looked that sort of thing up before they had actually tried to prosecute the case. So the Crown Prosecutor took the case back to the cops saying, get us more information or we're going to have to kick it. Well, I told the police that no, they can't take another look at my bike. They'll just have to present what they have in court. Needless to say, I finally get there in court and they dismiss the case. Now, of course, there's something I knew when I was talking to the police. I knew that the policy was being rewritten. That's because I kept emailing and emailing and emailing people, to the point where they finally started giving me answers. I started asking, through Freedom of Information Act requests, specific questions. Who authorized the policy? At first they didn't know the 2006 policy. The new policy, well, the manager of vehicle safety. the register of motor vehicles. Are e-bikes that do not require registration allowed to use cargo trailers? Yes. When was the policy officially adopted? December 2013. That was after my first adjournment and before the call from the police. So I knew that this new policy was in the works. When will it be announced? Where will it be announced? The public safety website. And then I started asking for what are the technical specifications. They wrote it as under 500 watt. Well, under 500 watts not good enough, because most electric bike motors are labeled as 500 watts. So I wanted to know, was it under 500 watt or 500 watt and under? The response back, 500 and under. They still have it listed as under 500 watt, I do believe. What's the maximum weight allowed? Not applicable. What's the maximum minimum height or length allowed? Not applicable. What are the technical specifications of the frames allowed to be used? Not applicable. This basically means that an e-bike can look like a pink flamingo as long as it satisfies the 500 watt and under and the speed 32 limit. It's an e-bike. What type of bicycle helmet does it require? Motorcycle helmet, or bicycle helmet? Bicycle. Is this the same policy as back in 2006? No, it isn't. Is there a minimum age requirement? No. Do they require any sorts of lights, etc.? If they're driving at night, they require a light. If they are driving during the day, they don't. Basically the same rules that apply to a bicycle, not a motor vehicle. If you have a DUI, are you allowed to drive an e-bike? They really didn't want to answer that question clearly, but they said the criminal code and impaired driving laws apply. Basically, if you have a DUI conviction, no, you're not allowed to drive an e-bike, even though legally they're a bicycle. Okay. So, this new policy. Let's get into a little bit of history on it. Well, it used to be up on the federal website. I had a link to it here on my own website here. It used to be buried under the general M section motor vehicle regulations, but for some reason they decided to hide it, so it's no longer there. So I looked for some archived information on it on the federal websites. Well, that's still there. Interesting to note that the definition of a moped or motorcycle does not include a power-assisted bicycle, e-bikes. They have a definition of what an e-bike or power-assisted bicycle is, which is entirely separate from motorcycles and motor-driven cycles. And there are the specifications. Basically, 500 watt motor, 32 kilometers per hour limit. And the Gazette website apparently has decided to archive and remove the information as well. The only thing you can find is a little thing they have that also says motorcycles do not include power-assisted bicycles. It's also wonderful when the government decides to hide previously publicly available information. So, since we're in New Brunswick, we go by New Brunswick laws and the New Brunswick Motor Vehicle Registration Act. So if you go to the Service New Brunswick website, can you do a search and find e-bikes? No, you can't. You can, however, find what vehicles require registration. And if you scroll down to the motor-driven cycle section, or electric motor-driven cycle section, and you look at the very last couple sentences here, they surreptitiously stick in a little section on e-bikes. If it is able to be powered by human force, notice the word is able, not must be. So in other words, if you can pedal it, if it has a motor equal to or less than 500 watt, and the motor is limited to 32 kilometers an hour, it is a bicycle, not a motor vehicle. It's lovely of them to have hidden that under what vehicles are registered instead of just letting you search e-bike and get a simple, concise, quick response. But nope, you do a search for e-bike and all you get is vehicle registration. So since they haven't published the actual policy, again I had to use a Freedom of Information Act request to get the actual wording of the policy. And here it is. Now the interesting thing is that originally one of the arguments I was putting forth was that the federal definition of an e-bike, section 1.21, says that they weren't motor vehicles. Well, of course the police came back and said that that doesn't apply to New Brunswick. It's federal. Well, they're right. It is federal. But it's interesting to note that when they finally created the e-bike policy for New Brunswick, they had a little sticker requirement. If you look at the sticker says it has to meet the requirements of section 2.1, the federal definition of an e-bike. It's kind of hilarious that the New Brunswick policy references the federal one, considering that it didn't apply. But anyway, here is the policy in English and French. They've kind of botched this because they've mixed in electric motor driven cycles with electric bicycles. So half of these paragraphs only apply to motor vehicles and the other half only apply to bicycles. The first part says that the registrar is going to permit limited speed motorcycles and scooters, blah blah blah, but they have to meet certain requirements. And then they skip to if it's a bicycle or e-bike, again, able to be powered, not must be powered by human force. A motor, here's where they've still got it messed up, less than 500 watt. But if you look at the service in New Brunswick, it says 500 and under. And the motor is not capable of assisting above 32, is a bicycle. And then they switch back to motor driven cycles in the next paragraph. If it has a motor greater than 500, then it needs a CMVSS compliance label. Electric bicycles do not require a CMVSS label. Only motor driven cycles do. The cops will try to ask you where the CMVSS is and then try and tell you that it's not allowed on the road. E-bikes do not require a CMVSS. Only motor vehicles do. And then you have the same sections again in French. And then here's the CMVSS limited motor cycle compliance label. Notice it's the motorcycle compliance label, not the e-bike label. The e-bike label is this one, the one that refers to the federal definition of 2.11. Now you also notice that it says the manufacturers must permanently affix a label. Not the sellers, not the importers, not the owners, the manufacturers. Also note that it says that homemade e-bikes will not have this label. There is no requirement for you, the owner, to have the sticker or to put the sticker on your bike. It's something that only manufacturers are required to do. So again, e-bikes, the manufacturer should put the sticker on it. Homemade e-bikes do not require the sticker at all. And you as the owner do not have to maintain a sticker on your bike. If it wears off, it wears off. But it does not require a CMVSS motorcycle compliance label. So if they try and tell you that your e-bike needs one, don't fall for it. So an e-bike can look like or be a push bike. It can look like a regular bicycle chopper. It can look like the Nikon ones. It can be a regular bicycle frame with a kit on it. Or it could look like hundreds and dozens of other electric bikes. Some of them look like gas scooters. But as long as they're 500 watt, 32 kilometers limited, and you are able to power them by pedaling, they're a bicycle. Now you notice the one thing that the e-bike policy didn't state? It didn't state that it had to have pedals. It just said that you had to be able to propel them by human power. In other words, you could put your feet on the ground and push them. You're able to power it by human muscle power. They do not require pedals, but I wouldn't try and push that point. If you got pedals, keep the pedals on. The ones that look like gas scooters, they have push on, pull off pedals. Keep the pedals on. Now, during all this fun, I kept a list of all of the emails that I was sending back and forth to people, and I actually put them on a website. Basically, everyone from the Minister of Transport and Public Safety to Services of Brunswick, I was asking, where are all these specifications? Because if you actually listen to what they were trying to say about it's a bicycle if it looks like a bicycle, but if it looks like a moped, it's a motor vehicle. Well, if you logically break down that sentence, well, what is a moped? A moped is a bicycle with a motor attached. They have a definition for that. It's called a motor-driven cycle. But they're also saying that if it looked like a bicycle, it didn't require registration. The only difference is it's an electric motor. So by the really dumb definition they were using, they were saying that an e-bike was a bicycle if it looked like a bicycle. But if it looked like a bicycle with a motor attached, it was a motor vehicle. Kind of a contradictory sentence there, isn't it? Anyway, I emailed every single member of the legislature. Not one of them responded. Oh, I'm sorry. Two did respond. One was the Minister of Transport, or at least the Secretary did. And the other was this Nimrod that actually said it wasn't the job of the members of the legislature to deal with legislation regarding electric bicycles. MLAs pass legislation. It is their job to deal with it. Anyway, back and forth, on and on, all these emails. And all they could do was give me the same crap over and over again. When I started telling them specifically there's no legislation that says that, please tell me exactly where you're getting this, they would just continue to ignore me. And then there was this, if it looks like a bicycle, it's a bicycle thing. So I started sending pictures of, well, bicycles. And saying, okay, well, which one of these are legal as an e-bike and which ones aren't? Because as you can see, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And then there's fun ones like this one right here. This particular bike frame is available as a pedal bike, as an e-bike, and as a motorcycle. The exact same frame. So how are they going to parse that? When does that look like a bicycle and when does it not look like a bicycle? But as you can see by all the pictures here, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and some of them even Gonna look like little cars. But these are still tricycles. They're bicycles. They're bikes. They just have 3 wheels. And here's that bike again with a gas engine on it. So here it is down here as a gas engine. And here it is up here as an e-bike. Same frame. And we got into the fun stuff. Well, this one doesn't even have pedals. Nor does this one. And then I started pointing out to them that, well, under the New Brunswick legislation, 4-wheel bicycles aren't bicycles. Segways weren't legal. And then I started getting into a little argument with them on what bicycle paths were. Because some of the bicycle paths that they were saying were bicycle paths were nothing more than, well, the gutter or the dirt shoulder of a road. And these emails went on and on and on and on and on and on and on until I got the ticket. Here's the bike that can be used as both a bicycle, e-bike, and as a motorcycle. 3 pictures in a row. An interesting fun point during all this debate back and forth, when they were trying to tell me that the federal definition of 1.21 didn't apply. 1.21 limits the speed to 32 kilometers an hour. I replied back to them that under their current definition of an e-bike, there was no speed limit. In other words, under the New Brunswick definition of if it looks like a bike, it's a bike. There was no speed limit. You could have an electric bicycle that could go 80 kilometers an hour as long as the posted speed limit was 80 kilometers an hour. I think that was the final straw, because once I pointed out that little loophole that they had introduced by trying to tell me that the federal definition didn't apply in New Brunswick, that suddenly we had a 80 kilometer an hour limit if the posted speed was 80 kilometers an hour. That quickly changed things, and they came out with a new policy that followed the federal definition of 1.21 and limited the speed to 32 kilometers an hour. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of these emails that were going back and forth until finally they came out with a policy. Now these are little clarifications that I've put up on the website in the notes section. The note 1 is the part about it looking like a bike or bike style frame. That was the other thing the police kept trying to say, is that it had to have a bike style frame. Some of them even started trying to say that it had to be if it had a saddle, it was a motorcycle. But if you actually go and try and look up what the definition of a seat or a saddle is for a bicycle or a motor driven cycle or a motorcycle, it just isn't there in the legislation. So anyway, with the new policy, this thing about it looking like a bike is no longer relevant. Now there is one curious thing in the law still. It's the motor that is limited to 32 kilometers an hour, not the bicycle. The bicycle is limited to the posted speed limit, but the motor can only assist you up to 32 kilometers an hour. So if the posted speed limit is 50 and you're pedaling away on a multi-geared bike and you can do 50, you're legally allowed to do 50. But the motor can't be helping you at that speed. It can only help you up to 32. Again, no maximum weight limit. E-bikes are allowed to use cargo bikes and trailers. That means little things. Like this. Oops. Scroll the page down a little bit too far. This is one of my previous customers, Heidi. She used a kid trailer to haul her kids around. She'd always drive on the sidewalk real slow, but the motor would let her get up hills and things like that. So that's the end of this little video. If you are harassed by the police on an e-bike, I'd like to know about it. Because if they keep doing what they've been doing in the past and harassing legitimate e-bike owners, it's going to lead to a lawsuit. I want to know where they stopped you, when they stopped you, what it was they told you. You can contact me through the Kijiji website, or you can email me at ebike@rogers.com. Thanks for listening.